Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm PPE and this is the Peso Pro episodes. If you're looking for more information or if you want to learn about personal finance, money management tips, or peso tricks, you've come to the right place. If you haven't done so yet, please hit on the subscribe button below. Today, we're gonna discuss an important topic in your financial independence journey, all about emergency funds. Emergency funds are the bedrock of any personal finance advice that you will get from all of the personal finance experts. Emergency funds are your cushion or safety nets for any unforeseen items that life may throw at you. In 2020, we've seen a lot of people lose their jobs or even sometimes lose their entire livelihood because of typhoons or other disasters that came within the year. Now we know 2020 is not unique, and these disasters may happen to us at any given point in time. They may also come in the form of medical emergencies that will cost us a lot of money that may end up putting us back into debt if we're not in it already. In this episode, we're going to discuss what are emergency funds, why they're important, what they're for, and how do you actually build one if you have not built one yourself. Emergency funds are funds that you set aside, ideally about 6 to 12 months of your estimated monthly expenses or your net take-home pay. Ito po ay money na nilalagay natin in a savings account separate from the one that we use day to day, ideally earning high interest para kumikita siya kahit nakatulog lang siya dyan. But more than this, kailangan po yung emergency fund natin ay nasa isang account na madaling i-access or madaling i-withdraw in case of an emergency. For me, the best place to put your emergency fund is actually a savings account in any bank. We do not expect the emergency fund to earn a lot of interest or dividends even. Our goal is for this money to stay put para pag kailangan natin siya, nandyan siya agad. Why is this important? I actually did a very simple survey with 10 friends and found that 6 of them do not have emergency funds at all. They have some money sitting in investments, they have some money sitting in, for example, VULs from insurance policies, which are all good. I'm not saying they're bad, but it's quite amazing that some of my friends actually have all of these investment items or investment vehicles already in play. But in case of emergency, some of these investment vehicles are not very liquid, or in other words, madaling kunin pag kailangan na natin. For example, if you have funds in an investment account, say a mutual fund, pag binenta mo siya, you're subjected to the price of that mutual fund at the time kung kailan mo siya i-redeem. In most cases, especially for natural or widespread disasters, the value of those mutual funds also go down. So if you don't have an emergency fund ready, what you may end up doing is you're gonna sell your investments or the mutual fund that you have at a loss or maybe at a lower value than what you have sold it for if you had waited for the right time to withdraw. So as the name suggests, emergency funds are really for emergency purposes and not for investment purposes, which means it's okay if the money doesn't earn a lot of interest, but as long as it's easily accessible when the time comes. Now, how do you build an emergency fund? It all begins with understanding the amount that you need to save up for your emergency fund. The first step is being able to calculate this amount. If you watch the video on the 8 pro steps towards financial independence, we'll link to it in the description below if you haven't. We've talked about emergency funds in 2 of those 8 steps. That's how important emergency funds are. In step number 2, we've talked about an initial or starter emergency fund to get you going, which is the lower of 50,000 pesos or 2 months of net take-home pay. In step number 4, we said we're gonna shift gears and create a full emergency fund of 6 months worth of your net take-home pay. For example, if your net take-home pay is 15,000, your initial starter emergency fund will be 30,000, which is 2 months, and your full emergency fund would be 6 months worth, which is gonna be 90,000 pesos. Here are 5 ideas I have for you to be able to build your emergency fund. 1 is for you to save regularly, which I know is obvious, but that's what it takes. So, as you form your budget and understand your savings patterns, I would suggest setting aside an amount of money that will go specifically into an emergency fund. That way, you have the discipline every month to put in whatever amount for you to be able to reach your emergency fund within the time frame that you set for yourself. Ideally, the best case is for you to be able to set up your emergency fund within 12 to 18 months or faster if you can. Now, if you don't have a lot of spare income from your net take-home pay, tip number 2 would be to sell items. I know you probably saw this coming, but when I say sell items, it comes in two forms. One is being able to sell some products that you may actually be able to produce. So yung nauuso ngayon, especially in the time of COVID, are homemade or home-baked items. Especially in this time where buying from actual stores can be a bit difficult, you actually showcasing your powers of cooking or baking that meal that you've always cooked for your family can actually be a profitable business. Think about sushi bake, cookies, or any other things that you can come up with that you can sell in established platforms like Facebook Marketplace or Carousel. By doing these one-off businesses, they may not end up being a full-blown business for you, but by doing this in your spare time, you're actually creating more income that you can fully set aside for your emergency fund. The second way of thinking about selling things is to understand ano ba yung mga bagay of value that you currently have but you may not be using as much. For example, maybe in the last Lazada sale, you bought something that you thought you needed but ended up only using it once or twice, or maybe it's something from a hobby that you started maybe years ago. Say, you tried to start learning how to play tennis, and after a few lessons, you figured you did not like the sport, but you bought a racket for that sport. So sometimes you may assess that racket is just sitting there gathering dust, hindi na siya magagamit. It may be of value to someone else, so instead of putting that somewhere in your closet and it taking up space, you may end up just deciding to sell that for whatever a reasonable value is. In doing so, you're creating space in your life, and you're also unlocking one-time income items that will help you build your emergency fund. Again, these two ideas can be ongoing if you really want to do and keep this as a side hustle. But if your initial intent is to come up with an emergency fund, these are two effective ways to come up with extra cash, not taking from your net take-home pay, but still being able to address the need of coming up with an emergency fund very quick. Tip number 3 is to find opportunities with online side hustles. These could be opening up an account and being a content writer for a blog company. And I've done this when I was still looking for jobs about 10 years ago. So there are websites that will pay you good for writing articles based on specifications or topics that their clients need for their blog websites. You can also look at opportunities of being a tutor of English for foreign nationalities like Chinese and Korean students. A lot of websites now offer these opportunities for work from home sideline freelance people so that you can earn that income and put that into your emergency fund. Sometimes these side hustles can also earn you good money, which can also add later on to other purposes in your financial journey, not just your emergency fund. Tip number 4 is to capitalize on any one-time unexpected items that may come your way. One of the most common ones, especially in December timing, is when your employer over-withheld some portion of the tax amount in your payslip along the year, which will create a tax refund. If your HR department tells you suddenly that there was actually withholding tax on your income and you will get a credit in December, I strongly suggest that you don't splurge on this on the next sale or the next celebration or buying an all-out splurge party for yourself. These are one-time windfalls that will be very beneficial for you to create your own emergency fund, and even if they're not recurring, they can be quite significant that will boost your chances of finishing your emergency fund quicker than you thought. The last tip is also one of the most effective ways, which is looking into recurring annual items that you get and setting aside a portion of those annual items for your emergency fund. Some examples are getting your 13th month pay and setting aside a portion of that 13th month pay instead of spending it on Christmas parties or a shopping spree this December. Other examples would be some companies actually give cash gifts every Christmas or every middle of the year as a one-time item. Some companies give you a clothing allowance every year, one time. So some of these items that you get on top of your net take home pay can be very good examples of what you can decide to set aside for that given year and put that into your emergency fund instead. Those are just 5 simple ways on how you can create. I'm sure you can think of more creative ways on how you can build your emergency fund. The most important thing is, as you follow the 8 steps towards financial independence, you understand that emergency funds are actually very important, not only to give you a cushion for the unforeseen circumstances in life, but also to give you the financial sense of security and for you to just feel secure that if ever something happens, that there's this one pot of money that you've set aside for especially that, and you don't have to worry about getting into debt in case the unforeseen circumstances do happen. If they don't, then it's good. The ideal state is for you to keep this level of fund intact as you move along and also review it every year para kung tumaas na yung expenses mo, for example, if you have lifestyle changes or a different life stage, say meron na kayong anak or nag-asawa na kayo, when those dynamics affect your monthly net take home pay, you also adjust your emergency fund for that so that you make sure that you have sufficient funds in that emergency fund. Lastly, the emergency fund is a great way to start habits and form those habits into something bigger later on. Once you've done setting up your 6-month emergency fund as a full emergency fund, you can now proceed to the next steps and using your discipline to come up with savings or even sometimes extra income, you now have this attitude towards money that's very positive, and you can use that to move forward into your journey in the future steps that we will discuss in the next episodes. That's it for this video on emergency funds. I hope you were able to understand why it's important, why it appeared twice on the 8 Pro steps, and how are you going to create your own emergency fund strategy. In the next few weeks, we're gonna discuss about savings accounts and the best ones that are currently there in the market. You can actually choose some of these best savings accounts to be able to host your emergency funds because they're easily accessible. If you want to be notified on videos on these savings accounts, please don't forget to click on the subscribe button and click on the notification bell so that you're notified once new videos pop up. Thank you for joining me in this episode of the Peso Pro episodes, and see you on the next one.